Hey guys, and welcome back to working on our visual novel project in Unity. Today we're going to be doing a lot more coding, so let's jump right in. I made a short plan up here of what we want to accomplish in this episode. First, making a character class. Second, making our dialogue script. And by script, I mean more like a movie script of the content of our story. And then we're going to parse that script. And you'll see how this all fits together. So lots of coding today. Before we start, let's go to our project in Unity. So open your visual novel project. Let's go to scene 1 for now. And look at our assets. We're starting to get some clutter. So right click, create a folder, and call it scripts. This way we can hold everything in one place. You know what, while we're at it, make another folder. Right click, create folder. Oops. And call this resources. And call this resources. Now drag your scripts into resources. You'll see why we do this soon. Alright, now let's click on our resources folder and our scripts folder, and let's make a new script. So right click, create C# script, and we will call this character. So double click on the character script and it will open up MonoDevelop, our working environment. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with coding, I really encourage you to keep following along. So right now, what we're making is we're writing code that will store all the information we need for any character. So when I talk about object-oriented programming, I mean, imagine a character as an object. What do all characters have in common? Well, they have a name. If we look at our plan, they all have a name. They all have an image or appearance, and they might have other poses or images that are associated with them. So in our project, that's what every character has in common. And you'll see how this helps us organize things as we move on. So let's start by having a string, which remember is a collection of characters. So we'll have a string character name. We can't just call it name because every game object in Unity has a name spelled like that, and you can't have variables with conflicting names or else it gets confused. So let's have our default name be blank, just so we have something there. So if you just do double quotes with nothing in it, the name will just be nothing. And we want a sprite, and we'll just call it character sprite. And this will initially be null. And null just means nothing. It is a programmer's way of saying nothing's there at the start. And finally, we will make an array, or you can think of it as a list, an array of poses. So we'll say character poses. And this will initially be null as well. So we need to so anytime we make a new character, we need to ensure these values are initialized. And we'll get into that later. For now, this is how a character will be defined. Now, what I want you guys to do, go back to your assets, or this window, right click, and oops, we got some warnings. Should always try to fix warnings. Okay, so a warning and an error. So if these were red, that means they would be errors, meaning we could not press the play button, the code wouldn't run. A warning is, it's just saying you're doing something that's bad practice. So right now it's saying we've defined these variables, but we're not doing anything with them, which is fine for now, because later on we're going to do lots of things with them in this class. So for now, this is safe to ignore, but when you're coding, never ignore warnings. Your code will run, but it's usually yelling at you for a reason. Okay, sorry for that brief interlude. Now go back over here to where your scripts are and right click, create a new script. Call this dialog parser. Now double click on this so it appears in MonoDevelop as well. And then we're going to make one last file. So go to your resources outside of the scripts folder, right click, create, and is there just a text file here? No? Okay, that's fine. So go to MonoDevelop, make a new file, go to MISC or general, no, go to MISC and make an empty text file, call it dialog. And then file, save as, put it in resources, not scripts, just in resources, and then save. Okay, now it should appear. So you have dialog. So before we write our parser, I want to walk through how our dialog is going to look. So for each scene, we need to store the dialog that will appear in the text boxes. So as we outlined in our plan, we want a name and then the content of what that person is saying, and then the pose or image. And so this will be for each button press. So you have the content in the text box, you press next, then you'd go to this line right here. And then you press next, you go to this line right here. If you press it back, you go back up here. Pretty straightforward, right? So let's put some example dialogue in here. Let's say we have David, that's the name, and he says, "Hello, how are you?" And his pose, let's say if we leave it blank, it's default. And then we have a person named Rachel, and she says, "Fine, thanks." And that's also a default pose. So the reason why David and Rachel are in plain text while the rest, the content is in quotes, is because the way our parser will work is it will split by commas. So for example, we have commas in the speech here, but it gets confusing to the parser if we go, okay, scanning each character, we hit a comma, okay, David is the name. Then we start here and we scan this. Well, this quote makes it seem like hello was the content and how are you was the image. So if we put it in quotes, we can send the whole thing over as a complete string. And then once the quote ends, it'll examine the next comma. So important distinction to make. Now let's navigate back to our dialog parser. We will ignore some of this for now. Let's make a function that's void load dialog. And it'll take a file name as a string so that we can change which dialog we're loading for different scenes. So we could use this for any scene we create. Now we're going to call this function in start, which is the initialization function, meaning it's called once every time the scene loads. So before we can do that, we need to decide what file we should be looking at. So make a string file that only contains dialogue. And navigate over to your text file and do file save as, and we're going to call this dialog1 instead of just dialogue. And if this comes up, doesn't matter for now. Dialogue 1 corresponds to scene 1, and this is a convention we will maintain throughout the project. So dialogue 2 corresponds to scene 2. Now, how do we find this so that we know which scene we are on? Start by making string scene num and have that be, let's see, we need to import some things now. So go up here and write using Unity editor And there's some other things we'll need. So let's just do that now. Using system.text, using system.io, using system.text.regular expressions. This is all we should need for now. And okay, going back to start, scene num will be editor application dot current scene. Right now, what's stored in here is scene 1, the name of our scene up here. And we want to extract this 1. How do we do that? We use regular expressions. So set scene num equal to regex, or regular expressions, dot replace, and then put scene num as the parameter. Our pattern is any numerical value, and then the evaluator is null. So this will go and replace all of these non-numerical characters with blanks. So this is now equal to this. It's the string 1. Now all you have to do to add that is say file plus equals scene num. And what this is doing is it's saying file equals itself plus scene num, which is dialog 1. And now we can say file plus equals dot text. All right, so now that we have our file name, we can pass it into load dialog. So load dialog file. And we need something that our load dialog does. So what does it do? It populates a list of actually, let's make a struct. This will be an interesting new concept. So struct dialog line, define this as having, we want string name. Yeah, I think we can just call it a name here. And string content. And then I don't know how we're going to define the poses yet, but let's just say, let's say it's an int, because I'm guessing we'll have an array of poses that can be defined as numbers. So we'll just say that for now. And we need to define a constructor for this struct. So the way we do this, we say public dialog line, and then we could say string n, string c, string, or int e. So this is bad naming, but it's okay for now. And this is just setting our variables that you pass in here. It's setting these to be these, and you'll see how we're doing that. It might seem weird if you've never programmed before, but this is just how it goes. All right, so we want a list of these. That'll probably be easier. So I think we need to import a new thing, system.collections.generic. I think that's it. List. Yeah, so we want a list of dialog lines, and we will call this, I don't know, we could call it just lines for now. Okay. So going all the way down here, our file name actually needs to be, a few things need to be added to it. I just realized this. So string file, we'll just call it that again, equals asset/resources plus our file name we passed in, because we need to describe which folder it's in. Now comes the more intense part. Declare a new string called line, and then we're going to make a stream reader, call it R equals new stream reader. Now this is a different looping convention, but bear with me. So using R brackets, I don't like how they align brackets, but feel free to organize them however you wish. So using R, do no parentheses, brackets, and then while line does not equal null, and then close R dot close. So this is just saying, using our reader while we still have lines to read, keep going, otherwise you should close the reader. Oops, this should actually be down here. That's why there is an error just now. Now have the line equal R dot read line. And really quick, I'm so stupid, I forgot we need to pass in our file name to the stream reader. That's the whole point. Okay, sorry about that. That was dumb. Now go back here, line equals R dot read line. And if the line is not null, if it's a valid line, then we will make a new dialog lines object. So let's say line dialog line entry equals new dialog line, and we want to pass in what we find in this line. So first we need to split up the line by commas. So in order to do this, line dot split comma, set this to an array, line values, and then we're going to say line values 0, line values 1, and then line values 2, but then this needs to be an int, so we're going to say int parse whatever we found in there. And then we want to add this line entry. So what do we call this? We called that lines dot add line entry. So theoretically, this should load the dialog 1 if we're in scene 1, and then read, go line by line, and create a list of each line that's organized by the name, content, and pose. So let's see if this compiles first. And it doesn't. Okay, that's fine. We're going to fix some errors. So look at line 56. Let's see if this works. Alright, and we got a bunch of warnings that I accidentally canceled out of. So you need single quotes around this. It's just what you have to do. Alright, let's try setting some breakpoints and making sure that we're getting the right things. Alright, so let's set a breakpoint here. Press play, attach, and then press play in Unity. Now, if this breakpoint doesn't get set off, it means that it means that this isn't behaving as I expected it to, which is fine. Oh, well, of course it isn't. Okay, so this is me being very, very stupid. So, in order for this to work at all, we need to create an object. So, create an empty object and call this parser, and then drag the dialog parser script onto it. Otherwise, it won't even know that there's a script to load. So, press play again. Our debugger is still active, except I didn't set the breakpoint. But let's see, it looks like there's an error. That's fine. Okay, string wasn't in the right format. So let's actually set the debugger this time. Breakpoint, play, waiting for it to go. Okay. So here we go. It recognizes the line correctly. And okay, so we're going to step over and let's look at our line entry, our line values. Yes, we want the line values. And this is exactly what I was worried would happen. So we need to figure out how to escape the commas. This is an interesting problem for me to solve, and I kind of figured this would happen, but I thought we'd see where this goes. I will look at this and figure it out by the next video. This will also be an interesting challenge if you're following along. Try to write your own parser, because I don't think this is something regular expressions will easily solve, but it looks like our structures are working. So we will finish this up in the next video and then move on to putting our dialogue in a text box. I hope these are helpful. Thank you so much for watching. It's awesome to do these.